everybody, and welcome to another Top 5 board gaming video. Today's video is completely different from pretty much every other video that I have done in this sort of realm. And that is because ordinarily I talk about the strategy and the mental aspect of playing games and thinking about what you like and what you don't like and that kind of stuff. In these games, we're going to be talking about ones that require physical skills. That is, you're going to actually be doing something. You're going to be flicking and throwing and tossing and blowing and all sorts of different stuff like that. We are talking about games that require dexterity in some way, shape, or form. These are extremely unusual and relatively few and far between because, let's face it, as gamers, it's not something we tend to do. We don't like having our pieces physically mashing together and hitting each other and bouncing and flying and all that kind of stuff. It's just not something that people are generally comfortable with if they play a lot of games. However, the ones I'll be talking about are designed exactly for that. So it's absolutely hilarious. And these are great games for game nights and families and all that kind of stuff because they tend to just be weird, quirky, and fun things. And you've got pieces flying all over and it's just ridiculous. Now for me, this goes back to when I was a kid and I used to play Tiddlywinks. And that is the one game I really remember with this until I started playing stuff like this. So as always, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this category. Have you played games like this? Do you enjoy them? Do you prefer ones that are really very specifically strategic? Please let me know anything and everything about it in the comments below. In addition, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my Facebook and Twitter pages. I post my new videos up there as well as fun, exciting, and interesting articles and all sorts of cool stuff. And I would love to have you guys there and to interact with you a little bit more. But with that, we will go ahead and get started with my number 5. Number 5 on this list is actually the only game on the entire thing that I myself own. And specifically, it's at number 5 because the part of the game that I'm going to be talking about is only an expansion to the base game. The game itself is Cash and Guns. The actual expansion I'm referring to, though, is the Yakuza expansion. The Yakuza expansion adds 2 major things. Well, 3 major things. You add teams, you add the Tontos, and you add the Shurikens. The way that the Shurikens work is you have to physically stand up, step back from the table, and throw this little foam shuriken. And essentially, whoever's little standee you knock over is considered to be out and wounded for that round. The reason that this is so far down on the list are 2 major things. First off, it's just an expansion. It's not the actual game itself. It's not an integrated part. And the second thing actually sort of goes off of that as well, where because it's not an integral part of the game, it feels more like a gimmick than anything else. That said, it's still really fun. And the fact is, you feel like a ninja because you get to stand away from the table and be like, "Whoozah!" It's really fun. It's cool. But unfortunately, I don't actually own the expansion. Either way, it's part of this Yakuza expansion for Cash and Guns, my number 5. At number 4, I've got a game that is very reminiscent of the dungeon crawlers such as D&D and Pathfinder, and more specifically with the feel for this game, Welcome to the Dungeon. The game itself is Dungeon Fighter. In Dungeon Fighter, the idea for the dexterity aspect is you have a big target in the middle of the table and you're trying to bounce dice onto it, so they have to bounce off the table and then land on the bullseye somewhere. You've got different colored dice that give the various characters different powers. You also have a bunch of different equipment cards as well. And the whole point is that the closer you get to the bullseye, the more damage you're going to be doing to the enemies as you go down. And it's really interesting. You've got like a little card holder and you're flipping over the enemies and trying to fight them one at a time and all this kind of stuff. And of course they're attacking you back. And it's just a really interesting thing. And I love that the dexterity aspect is so central to the game itself, because that is how you are actually doing the damage. That is how you are doing the fighting of Dungeon Fighter. And again, getting the equipment and things can sort of mitigate some of the issues that you have with actually being able to land on the platform and all that kind of stuff. That said, the reason that this is a bit lower on the list is because for a game like that, I would rather have mechanics that are a little bit more solid, just in terms of less random. Now, again, I know the whole point is that it's supposed to be a dexterity-based game, but it just seems very out of place for a game like Dungeon Fighter to have this extremely random bullseye-centric thing. Like, you don't feel like you're a skilled warrior, you feel like you're just some guy bouncing dice off a table for no particular reason. And it's just a little bit awkward in that sense. And the other big issue is that the opponents, the enemies, are just straight up attacking you. And they don't have to roll any dice or anything like that. So it's sort of one-sided in that sense. But it's still a really fun game, and actually a great example of how we can use these dexterous actions in order to play through a board game. But with all of that, Dungeon Fighter is my number 4. At number 3, I've got a game that takes us all the way to the Wild Wild West. Now, if you are familiar with this genre of games, then you probably know I am talking about Flick 'em Up. That's right, it is a play on Stick 'em Up, and the idea is actually really clever. You've got little meeples that have fun little hats on, and each meeple person is allowed to move, and then they're allowed to shoot somebody. So the way that you move is with an individual disc that you flick over. You've got all sorts of different barriers, buildings, hay bales, all sorts of different stuff, and it's like you can't hit anything as you're trying to move, and then when you're shooting somebody, the idea is to physically knock over the other meeple, and then they get a wound and things like that. And it's just like really, it's kind of adorable, honestly. And on top of that, with the buildings, you're actually able to enter into the buildings because you can slide the disc underneath the buildings, and then you're inside and you can do special actions and all sorts of different stuff like that. On top of that, you've got specific roles. You've got like the sheriff, and then you've got all of the outlaws. You've got the roles sometimes have individual powers. The buildings have special actions you can take. There are also a bunch of different scenarios you can play through as well, where, for example, you're doing one where you're trying to save somebody from being hanged. So there's actually a really, really large amount of versatility in this game. And again, unfortunately, I just don't own it, which is really sad because it's a fun game and it's one of the ones that I do want. But it's just like with all of these games, it just feels so weird because the whole point is you're just trying to knock and bash everything together. And it's kind of hilarious, but it is so much fun. And the theme actually comes through surprisingly well. Again, it's like Old West, but at the same time, like it feels very like good and the bad and the ugly type of thing. And it's just like weird, crazy family fun. And one of the best parts about it is that you've actually got two teams. You've got like the good guys and then the outlaws. So it's kind of nice because both teams are taking part in the flicking and the shooting and all that kind of stuff. So it doesn't feel like Dungeon Fighter in terms of it's kind of one-sided and you're just sort of taking the brunt of damage and things of that nature. But with all of that, Flick 'em Up is my number 3. At number 2, I've got a board game that is actually based off of one of my favorite video games from when I was a kid. The board game is called Rampage. Now, this is previously known as, I believe it was Terror in Meeple City, if I'm not mistaken. And this is just like crazy, ridiculous, Destructoid-based awesomeness. That's pretty much all I can describe it as. You are literally playing as monsters trying to go around and destroy a city. The city consists of buildings that are stacked up with like meeples, and then there's a floor, and then there's meeples, and there's a floor like resting on top of the meeples. And once you get next to a city, you can actually physically take your monster and drop it on top of the buildings, and whatever you destroy is yours because destroyed it, and then you can eat the people, and like you can get new teeth so that you can eat more people. If there's a vehicle, you can actually flick the vehicle from on top of yourself, so it's like you're throwing it, and you can throw it at a building, or you can throw it at another monster and try to knock them over. It's just completely wacky. The other major thing that you can do is you can use your breath weapon like Godzilla and be like, right? Where you yourself stand next to your monster, and you physically blow onto a building. Like, I'm not making this up. That is literally what you do. It is absolutely hilarious. This is a game that, on this list at least, that is absolutely perfect for little kids especially, because it's really cartoony, it's fun, it's colorful, and again, it's completely crazy. It is so cool. And the entire premise of it is you're trying to destroy this poor city full of poor innocent meeples. But it doesn't matter, because you're a hungry monster, so you're gonna go and eat all of them. And it is awesome. And that is why the Rampage, also known as Terror in Meeple City, is my number 2. At number 1, I've got a game that has become a sort of cult classic in the Dexterity gaming world, where we've got probably, I think, about a dozen expansions for it, and you can play with literally about 30 people if you've got enough of the items for it and all this kind of stuff. The game itself is Pitch Car. In this game, you are building up a track that can go up and down and wind and this and that and the other and all sorts of crazy stuff, right? It is a track that looks like it's designed for cars, and that's the whole point. And the idea is that everybody starts at the starting line, and you go around the track however many times, and once you pass the finish line, then you win. Yay! The whole thing, though, is that you are flicking your car along. Right? That is the idea. The cars are these little discs that are about that big, and you're just being like, pew, 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 pew. And there's a whole bunch of different rules where, like, if you fall off the track, you have to go back to where you started. If somebody knocks you off the track, then you end up back where you got knocked off from. You can try to knock people off, and then again, you've got like the ramps and stuff, and if you fly off the ramp, you got to land back onto the road. All sorts of crazy stuff like this. It's just, again, this has become a classic of this type of game, and it's one of these great things where not only is it tremendously fun to play, but you can literally play it with several dozen people. If you're going to play with that many, though, I highly recommend you take a like ultimate werewolf approach to it, where you have like somebody moderating it and just watching what everybody's doing, so that way it'll hopefully be a little bit more efficient and it won't get too ridiculously crazy. But it is a really fun game because it is all based off of skill, and it's sort of like the tortoise and the hare. Are you going to go for like the big giant win and try to get as far as you can, as fast as you can? Or are you going to take the little victories as they come? You know, that's the type of thing that you need to think about with this game. And again, you've got probably about a dozen expansions or so that add all sorts of different track styles, like the little S-curves, U-turns, all sorts of different things like that. You can add or not add railings to the thing. You can have like the inside track versus the outside track during turns. It can become complete chaos, but it is a hugely fun game. And again, completely based off of skill, aside from, you know, hitting other people off the track and all that good stuff. But with all that, Pitch Car is my number 1 dexterity-based game. Well, folks, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video, my top 5 favorite dexterity-based board games. Again, this is probably the most different game video of this type that I have ever done, because this is one that involves physical action and physical skill as opposed to mentally strategizing and things of that nature. But even so, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, let me know what you guys think about this particular genre in the comments below. What are your favorite games from it? Do you like the ones that I mentioned? Are there others that I'm missing? Because again, I really have not played a lot of these games. Well, I've not played a lot of games in the genre. You know what I mean. But either way, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Once again, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at my Facebook and my Twitter feeds, because I will be sharing all my videos as well as just a bunch of cool articles and stuff. You can find the links to those in the description below. But with that, thank you so very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.